I watched these beautiful angelic beings. I called them my angels. Come in and they took the pavers out of the road, out of the path. And each individual person had their own path and their own pyramid and their own pavers. It was really cool. I remember seeing three, and three was a very powerful number there, by the way. Everything I saw was in threes. It seemed like three angels, three paths. It was very powerful. They put them back to the bottom of the pyramid, these angels, and I knew that they had rebalanced that pyramid. It wasn't kind of like you think of Jenga now, like it wasn't doing that anymore. And they went to the top of the pyramid and they pulled off a paver, and I watched it recreate itself. And I knew that we have more creations in our journey, like more chances, more um, more chances. I don't know how else to put it because that's what my little child thought inside my head. So I'm going to put it that way. And they started paving the path. And I said, "What are you doing?" Because I wanted to know what this was. And they said, "We are the pavers. You are not. All you have to do is walk it." And I asked, "How do you know if you're walking it right?" I'm going to tell you the two things that are the most beautiful things you'll ever hear and see on the other side.
Okay.
One is
My guest today is Susan Grau, who was locked in a freezer when she was almost 5 years old and she had a near-death experience. But even before then, Susan has been able to hear spirit and has been connected to the other side. But after her near-death experience, those abilities grew. And I'm really excited to talk to her because she has insights that are rare for anybody. And she has several books that she's written, and she is a psychic medium. And this is going to be an amazing conversation because as a child, she really did have an amazing experience. So, Susan, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Me too. I remember when I first heard your story because it's not very often that we get to hear a near-death experience from a child's perspective.
Yeah.
Much different than the adult perspective because it's not tainted. And I love that when you're telling this story, how many times you say, "I didn't have words and I didn't understand what they meant when they were telling me all these things." And you had to almost come back and relearn the language of what you were shown because you were so innocent going into that, which to me
Mhm.
leads to even more credibility with your experience. So
Thank
tell
you.
us a little bit about how you were already connected to spirit before you got locked in this freezer.
Okay, so my mother, my brother, and my sister all have this gift. My father and my other brother did not. And I didn't really know it was a gift. I didn't know much about it. But when I was about 3.5 years old, it's probably the only thing I really remember clearly was when we had animals on our land crossover, I would see them and they would be floating above me. And I thought that I didn't think anything, honestly. I say I thought that was normal because I must have thought that because I thought nothing. I was sad that they left the physical body, but I could see them. So it didn't affect me the same way. And I thought everyone saw them, I guess, because normally you would ask, "Do you see that?" And so that was kind of what I felt. I don't recall seeing humans, but I had not lost anyone I knew. But at just tipping towards 5, I was playing fort with some boys, and they asked me if I wanna keep playing, basically, get me popsicles. And so I climbed up in the freezer, and it was in the garage, and I was calling out popsicle flavors, and I was facing inward, and I realized there were no popsicles, so I was getting ready to turn around and let them know there's no popsicles because it wasn't plugged in. Now, I was a little too young to understand that there wasn't going to be popsicles, I guess, or I was hoping there would be, but I don't think I recognized the plug wasn't in the wall. It's that simple. And I heard the freezer door click, and I thought, they closed the door on me, and I thought, I'm in on a game. This is a game. We're playing a game, and everything's okay. And then I heard the garage door thud. And I just remember this feeling inside of me of absolute terror. I innately knew that I knew I was in trouble, number one, but I knew I was going to leave this planet. I knew I was not going to see I knew everything about death in an instant. And I don't know how to describe it because I didn't hear the word death, but I knew. And I started screaming at the top of my lungs as loud as I could. And it's kind of like the sound of a cat. My mother said she heard something that sounded like a cat in heat. It's a very, very high pitched sound. And that's the sound of terror in a child, and probably in most people. And my mother heard it, but she thought it was the cats. And I continued to scream, and I was beginning to panic. And I could tell I was panicking, but I didn't know what to do. I couldn't turn around. I was kind of stuck between the shelves and the door. And as little as I literally couldn't wiggle myself out of it. I was just stuck there. And I remember facing inward and thinking, no one's going to hear me. No one's going to hear me. But I just kept screaming. And then I saw these three lights, and I heard, stop screaming. And I didn't. I kept screaming like a kid does when they're told what to do. And I was in too much trauma at that point to really hear them. But then I heard one of them very profoundly say my name. And that shocked me. And it shocked me just enough that I heard what they said. And she said, stop screaming. We're going to get your mommy. And I felt, and she had said my name before that. So I was paying attention at that point. Like it was almost like hearing a mother talk to me. It felt like that too, honestly. I never share that, but it did. It felt like that. And it felt very warm and loving, and all the lights did. And the next thing I knew, I was at the bottom of I felt like they were saying, but wait, or but first, but they didn't. And then I flashed, and it was a flash. It wasn't a pop. It's so hard to find human words for it. It wasn't a pop. It was a flash almost. And I was at the bottom of this stairway. I call it the stairwell. And there's a reason, because I looked up it, and there was this room, and it had pillars all broken and cracked. And I noticed that the stairs were cracked, and I wanted to get up inside this room that had open walls, just the pillars, and it had an open ceiling that was round. And I can't tell you what it was made of, but I feel like it was cement. That's what it felt like to me, which is odd, but it did. And I recall thinking that I needed to get to the top inside this room because I knew there was something there I had to see. And the minute I thought it, I was there. I was on the edge of this, what I call the well. And I have to tell you that I studied under Raymond Moody, Dr. Raymond Moody, and Raymond said to me, have you ever thought the well was the tunnel? Because I always said, I didn't get to see a tunnel. Why didn't I get to see a tunnel? Everybody else sees a tunnel. And he said, no, they don't. Some call it a well, some call it a funnel, some call it all different kinds of things, a hurricane, all different things. And I was in shock when he said that to me. It was like the most aha moment I've had. And I was grown, very grown. That wasn't that long ago, actually. And I looked inside this beautiful well, and it was infinite. And I knew that the ceiling that wasn't there was infinite. And somehow they blended. Um, you ever see those pictures where lights come down, and then there's like a light going up into it? That's what it felt like one infinite consciousness. And I saw movement inside of it. And again, I'm telling you how an adult would say it. I did not understand most of this as a child. I probably understood maybe a tenth of it, but I never forgot it. And I remember seeing this movement, and looking back, it looked like DNA. And it was words, and they were twisting and turning and going together like DNA would. And I knew it was prayers because I had been to church. And I heard things like, my mommy's got cancer, please don't let her die, God. Or this is just examples. Or oh, I'm gonna turn 16 and my dad won't let me have a car, God, make him give me a car. They were people's desires. And I didn't really understand that, because I just saw it as prayer. And it's the same. We verbalize our desires, and it's basically the same. And I looked at them and I asked, "Where am I?" And they said, "You're in the room of heart's desires." And I said, "Do you answer all those?" Because I knew they were what I would call prayers as a child. And they said, "No, Susie. Sometimes what people desire the most isn't good for them." I didn't like hearing it. My mom used to say, just because you want it doesn't mean it's good for you. So I was kind of a little bit in shock. But you have to remember that I was basically outside of a body. I wasn't, I was me. I took me with me, but I wasn't in a body. I think I thought I was, but I wasn't. And I looked above and I could see these crystally, all pyramid shapes. Everything was pyramid shaped to me. And it was crystally and clear and water-like. Everything looked that way to me. And color and beauty. And I looked ahead of me and there was this road. I call it the Yellow Brick Road because I had seen The Wizard of Oz and that made sense to me. And they were pavers. You know how that road is paved in The Wizard of Oz? That's what it looked like to me, but it shined. There was a shine to it and like gold. And there were pyramids at the beginning of these paved roads. And I watched humans, what I would think was humans, go to the bottom of the pyramid and pull from the bottom of the pyramid these pavers and start trying to pave their path. I believe I innately knew that that was the life journey. And what happens when you pull from the bottom of a pyramid? Well, it becomes unbalanced. I somehow knew that. I don't know if I understood it at that moment, but during my childhood, I knew that. I can say that. And I felt sad because I saw them paving these paths, and these paths were all bumpy and crooked and out of whack, and it was bad. And I saw them drop to their knees with this emotion I can't describe, kind of like when we're in our darkest night of the soul. And I watched these humans crying out for help. And it was, please God, please help me for the love of God. Nothing's working, nothing's happening the way it should, and everything's going wrong. And all these different thoughts. I'm going to lose this person. And I felt like they were verbalizing it, but I wonder sometimes if they were thoughts in my head. And it's really emotional for me to talk about all this. So I please forgive me if I start
No,
sniffling.
no. And I want to ask you a question right here because I feel like you said to the audience, they were expressing emotions that you can't even describe, like the dark night of the soul. And then you started to tear up. Susan, this happened 60 years ago. You've told this story in books, on shows like this. You've repeated it probably to people in your lives. And yet here you are, still emotional this long after. How? Why?
I think when something is that big of an impression on you, think of something that happened in your journey when you were young and it had, or even older, that had such a profound effect on you that you remember every detail and you still feel it as if you're there when you talk about it.
So it doesn't feel any different now as how you remembered it when it happened.
Not any different.
So
I
that's
just
what you're
don't feel
tapping
like a
into.
child, but I feel that child. I do.
It's incredible. It's
It is
incredible the
incredible.
depth and clarity of the messages and the memories and the specifics that you have after this much time has passed and that you were a child. I think about things I remember as a child and I can't remember them with the clarity of adult things.
Sorry.
No,
Um,
it's one I love to see this because it's so authentically you that you connect still with this.
Oh my gosh. I have to tell you, later on in life, not that long ago, actually, I had a brain tumor. And when I went into surgery, I had another experience. And it was like being there again.
Oh,
And I
wow.
actually woke up and said to my friend, who I didn't know was in the room, it was pitch black, "Am I dead? Oh my gosh, am I dead?" And I know it's not pitch black. I don't know why I said that. And she said, "Well, I certainly effing hope not, because if you're dead, that means I am. And I thought, okay, I started laughing and it was over. But for that moment, I thought I was there forever because I had
Wow.
had another experience. I was so deep under. Um,
So we go
but
back to the pavers. I'm sorry,
yes,
I just had to ask you
no,
when you got emotional there. I'm so glad that I did so that everybody can connect to what you were feeling in that moment.
yeah, it's pretty amazing. Yeah. Um, but also you feel one consciousness. And so when they were emoting that kind of suffering, I felt it and I still do. Till this day, I can feel it. That's why, I try to help people. It's why most of us help people because we want to end the suffering as much as we can for them and our own. Um, but anyway, I watched these beautiful angelic beings. I called them my angels. Come in and they took the pavers out of the road, out of the path. And each individual person had their own path and their own pyramid and their own pavers. It was really cool. I remember seeing three, at least three. And three was a very powerful number there, by the way. Everything I saw was in threes. It seemed like three angels, three paths. It was very powerful. And they put them back to the bottom of the pyramid, these angels, and I knew that they had rebalanced that pyramid. It wasn't kind of like you think of Jenga now, like it wasn't doing that anymore. And they went to the top of the pyramid and they pulled off a paver, and I watched it recreate itself. And I knew that must be that we have more creations in our journey, like more chances, more um, more chances. I don't know how else to put it because that's what my little child thought inside my head. So I'm going to put it that way. And they started paving the path. And I said, "What are you doing?" Because I wanted to know what this was. And they said, "We are the pavers. You are not. All you have to do is walk it." And I asked, "How do you know if you're walking it right?" Because I saw them building it wrong. So naturally, I'd wonder if they could walk it right. And they said, "We bless and block everything. Make no mistake. You can get through a block, battered and bruised at best, or you can shift. And if you see another wall, shift again. And if you see another wall, shift again. And before you know it, you'll see us paving your path. You think you know what's best for you, Susie. We know what's best for you." And they said, "What you try to control controls you, and what you run from chases you." This is probably the most emotional I've been when I'm telling this story, and I don't know why I'm feeling this so profoundly today. Um, Meaning on a podcast, when I tell my family my story, of course, I cry, but and I didn't really understand what they meant. What I try to control controls you. And, I have to tell you, I tried to control most things in my life until I finally got it as an adult. So I spent my life like everyone else doing the human experience. And I wanted to control everything in my world because I thought that kept me safe. And, with my kind of history in my life, I needed to be safe. So most people believe that when you have this happen, you come back and your life is magnificently wonderful and you understand everything. Well, let me tell you, for a child, that isn't necessarily true. I have my doctorate in divinity. I work with children who have near-death experiences, and I can tell you that it's not always true. We have hard lives too, and I did. I call it the PhD in hardship. That's what I chose. Um, so what happened next was I flashed into, they said more things to me. Some of it was private and personal, and some of it was just, lessons. And then I flashed in another room. I call it rooms because that's how they could describe it to me, but they weren't rooms, they were places. And I remember seeing, this little girl. And I wonder now if it was me because someone asked me that question on a podcast, and I think it might have been. But I was standing with a group in a soul situation, and I was watching these. I don't know how to describe it. It was like a book, but it was like virtual, but there was no such thing in my day. And so I don't know how to describe it, but it was like a pamphlet coming in front of people. And I watched these people, this little girl was saying, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that and I'm going to go through this and I'm going to go through that and my soul's going to expand and my soul's going to grow. And I'm thinking, what does expand mean? I didn't know. I thought of a rubber band. That's what I thought of, but I didn't know what it meant. And then she said, my soul's going to grow. Well, I knew what growing up meant. And so it started to make sense to me. And they were discouraging all of these activities. And I heard them say to her and to this family, no, 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 that's way too much to go through. And you don't have to go through all those things. And she was like, no, no, I can. I know I can. I want to do it. I can do it. And I was hearing things like, well, I'm going to step in at this time and I'm going to be there for you at this time. And I was hearing the story. And she was making a contract because I asked them, where am I? And they said, you're in the room of knowledge. I think a lot of people call that the Akashic Records. I don't really relate to that name. And it's not that I don't believe in it. I just relate to the room of knowledge. And I always have. And they kind of explained to me what they were doing and what that looked like. And as soon as they got done explaining to me that this was their contract, and I felt like they were trying to say to me something along the lines of, if you have a contract to be married, you'll be married. Who you marry, how long you marry, the kind of marriage you have, all of those things are free will for your soul to expand and grow. And when they said to me, that information, I recall one other step that they took with me, which was this person was saying, I can do it. I know I can. And they looked right at her while I was understanding that process and said, well, you do have free will. They were gone. And another group of people were coming in. I didn't talk to them. And I said, where did they go? And they said they went to their next incarnation. I had no idea what they meant. Later on in life, someone said to me, Susan, do you believe in reincarnation? I was a young woman. Do you believe in reincarnation? And I said, oh my God, there's that word. Oh my God. Yes, I know what that is. It was mind blowing to me. I knew what that was.
Do you
I had
believe in
seen it.
it?
I do because I had seen it. But I didn't know that it was called reincarnation. I didn't know what mediumship was. I didn't know what a psychic was. I didn't know any of those things as a young teen. But I knew what that was because I heard the word incarnation in there. So I knew. So I had seen people reincarnating and it was finally clear to me. So you see, they would download as I went through life what everything meant. And then I flashed, and more things happened there. And then I flashed into another place, another room, another place. And I was in this field and it was called the Room of Companions. And it was animals. And I remember I hadn't lost an animal at that point. So I certainly didn't know to look for one of my animals. But what I saw were tons of animals, all different kinds. And I wasn't afraid of any of them. And not that they looked fierce in any way, but I wasn't afraid of any of them. And I remember I was in this field and there were daisies and what are the flowers that you blow on to me? Dandelions.
Dandelions.
I always forget. And the colors were different though. And the size and the beauty of them. Everything is pulsating. Everything is alive. Even a blade of grass is moving like a pulse of life. Everything. And even color. That's what you feel, like life, fully life. We don't have a clue what that means here. And I don't know if I'm going to get through this part. I looked to my left and I saw this being on this mountain. And I remember it emanating a love. There's no description. I can't even come close to tell you what it felt like. But I wanted to get up this mountain and get close to this love. And I couldn't. I don't know why I couldn't, but I couldn't. And I felt this beam of pure love coming towards me. And I was everything and I was nothing. I was perfect in every way. I only told that story to dear people in my life until about 6 months ago when I started sharing it on the podcast. So I'm still very reactive to it. So I apologize again. I'm supposed to be able to talk through this.
No, this
Um,
is real. This is so real.
and you
Please don't
cannot
apologize. You
imagine
shouldn't have to apologize for anything like this.
uh, the power of this love would heal every broken crack in you. It's amazing. I saw this pyramid and it was in the same vicinity, but it wasn't in the same place. And I saw movement inside of it. And I remember looking inside of this pyramid and I was glaring in it and I could see movement like faces and bodies. And I wanted to put my hand inside this pyramid. And by the way, when I had my next experience, this happened again. And I tried to put my body or my hand inside of this because I wanted to know who these people were. And I knew they loved me and I loved them, but I didn't know who they were. They must have been ancestors or just people crossing over. And I couldn't. And I innately knew if I could have gotten through that, that was the boundary. I would have never come back. I just knew it. And so I didn't try anymore because I wanted to see my mommy. Now, most people that have NDEs, not children though, but most adults that have them, they don't want to come back. And I understand why. But a child is attached by DNA to their mommies, literally by every part of our being, our soul attached, you know? And so when you're soul attached, you want to be in that environment. I looked to my right. I saw an animal. Um, I thought it was a dog, but it was big. And looking back as I got older and I started to have this affinity for anything wolf, anything, I loved them. I was so attached to them. I would go to sanctuaries. I still do. I stand and I stare at them. I've petted them. I've had them jump up and look into my eyes. They see into your soul. I feel like I could have been in that environment with that creature, but I'm not sure. I'm not positive. Um, it sounds so mystical, but it is mystical there. It is everything mystical and beautiful. And I remember looking to my right and seeing this beautiful, I call her my she's my floating angel, but my light angel. She was floating towards me. And I thought, I want to float. I hope I get to float. And I was so excited and so innocent. And I just wanted to float so bad. I'm sure I was, but I didn't know it. I wasn't in attention to my being. The only time I felt in attention to my personal being was when the love came through. Then I felt it. Other than that, I was just there. I was part of the whole, expansively part of the whole. Then she said to me, it's time to go. And I was ready. I was okay. I didn't know what go meant. And the next thing, and she was coming out of like this, the colors in my book. So I'm going to show you this. This was the color of this is the lights I saw. And this was the color of the cottage that I saw. It was iridescent. But it was a cottage that she came out of. And that's the look it had, were those colors kind of seeping through in a light shine. And then I flashed and I was on this walkway. I think it was a walkway. I know it was a path of some sort. And there was a river coming down. And she said, we are birthed or we go back through the water and we get cleansed. And I thought she was talking about cleaning me before I saw my mommy because I was dirty and sitting in a field. Okay. I was already going back to the human existence in my mind. So they were going to put me in the water and give me a bath, clean me, and I was going back to mommy. And then she told me I was going to have a very difficult journey and that I was prepared for it and I would help many people. No clue what she meant, but I know it scared me enough that I hesitated. And then she said, but you're going to see your mommy. And I said, okay. And the next thing I knew, my mother was, I didn't even know that. I was talking to my mom over there, by the way. I could see her for a few times. I saw her. I think that's how I learned to have communication, honestly. And I remember her looking when I would say, Mommy, I'm in the freezer, or they would say, your baby's in the freezer. They had said it 3 times to her. Now, my mother was put in an institution, and part of it was because they thought that she was crazy because she saw spirits. So they had her highly medicated on Valium, which is what they gave at the time. And so she wasn't listening to her instincts at all. But she did hear it. And the third time she heard it, she said she went outside and went, oh my God, my baby's in the freezer. But then she saw the garage door closed. And I don't recall the exact story here. I only remember what I remember, and my mother's not here for me to ask. But I believe she said, I went to open the garage door and thought, well, Susie couldn't have opened this. There were no garage door openers. So she was going to turn around, and something told her, don't go in. So she went in, she opened the freezer door, and I was facing inward. She spun me around and she said I was ashen with blue tip fingers. There were no cell phones at the time, so she dropped me to run to get a phone to call 911 or whatever it was, to call for help. And I fell forward. I hit my chin. I still have that scar, and cracked it open just enough. It shocked my system, and I took a breath. So I was meant to be here. When I got well and felt better, I opened my eyes a couple times, and I didn't really see a lot, but I could feel movement. But when I really opened my eyes, I could see spirits. They were looking
Wow.
in my windows, under the bed, in the corner of the room, down the hallway. They were everywhere. And I'd stand at the edge of my bedroom, and I'd call for my mom to come get me to go potty because I was too afraid. And my brothers saw them, and my sister saw them. And so they were there. And my brother scared my sister and myself and my brother, but I'd crawl in bed with my sister, and then all would be well. But my mother used to put me on the floor next to her when she'd bring me in the room because I was scared, and I could see them still. But she didn't want me kicking her while we were sleeping. And so she'd put me on the floor, and there they'd be. So I was hearing mumbling. I didn't really understand the voices at that point. But as time went on, I did. And it wasn't like Sixth Sense. People always ask me, was it like the Sixth Sense? And no, it wasn't scary. They weren't vomiting in front of me and telling me how they died.
That is a
That's the
great
spook.
movie, by the way.
Yeah, it is a great movie. And I could relate to some of it. Like that feeling that they're there, and you see the wind move something, and you see them moving past you, and you feel the chill, or the warmth, depending upon what's visiting. And you get goosebumps, and you're scared instantly. I would cover my head and put pillows over my head and say, go away, go away, go away. I'd put the blankets and the pillows over my head, and they didn't go away. So my whole life they woke me. Wake up, I just died. They think I died on purpose. I didn't. Please tell them. You're going to hear that so and so's brother, sister's best friend died, and that's me. And they think I did it on purpose, but I didn't. Please tell them. And then I'd get a call, or I'd hear about so and so's best friend, brother, sister, whatever it was, and I knew the information. And my life was spent like that. And I didn't really take any action on it till I was probably about, I'm 17 or 18 or 19, right in that age bracket. And UCLA Medical Center, and I think UCI also, but UCLA was studying all about ESP, extrasensory perception. And I had read about it in the newspaper because we didn't have encyclopedias and all that stuff. At least I don't remember. Probably did, but I don't remember those. And we didn't have any internet for sure. And so I was reading it in the newspaper. So I called the number, and I told them what was happening to me, that I was getting these visitations. What precipitated it was my grandmother came to me, and it was so profound, and I didn't know she was dead. And the next day I found out that she had crossed, and I was in shock, and it freaked me out because she talked to me for a long time, and I was wide awake. I actually woke my husband and said, I can go to sleep now. And he said, what? Go to sleep? Because I never told him. I never
That's
told
crazy
him.
to me that you would never tell him about that before you got married.
No, he was the most popular guy in high school, and I wasn't. I was a little off the tracks to people because I was seeing spirits, and he was that person that, gives you those feelings that you only have that, that childhood when you first meet. I met him, I saw him across the room, said, I'm going to marry him. I saw him across a fairground. And I just knew I couldn't tell him because if I told him he would not marry me, he would think I was nuts. I had kind of a nutsy family because we were all doing this. And he would say things like, your family's kind of kooky.
Does he
They're kind of
know now,
out there.
Susan, for God's sake?
Is what?
Does he know
What?
now, for God's sake?
He does, but he's not. We ended up. He ended up having some trouble with alcohol and drugs, and we ended up breaking after 10 years of marriage. And I remarried. My husband and I remarried. I didn't tell him till after we were married, but right after we were married, I told him. And he used to think, no way. But then he came and watched me,
Watched
and
you
he
what?
said it
Watched
was
you
life
what?
changing. Reading people. I just knew
Like in
things.
an auditorium or a group setting, you mean?
And he was in shock, and he said it's undeniable. At first I took him to see James Van Praagh,
Oh, yeah, he's
and
great.
yeah, I studied under him and
You
Lisa Williams.
did.
Yeah, yeah. And how I wanted to, and I also, wanted to know everything about grief. So I studied grief very intensively because if you don't do that, you shouldn't be doing mediumship. I also had my own grief. But yes, my husband, and he said he saw me read. We've been married almost 39 years. He said he saw me read, and he said, I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt you couldn't know these things because I know who you are. You couldn't know that they had coins in their pocket that had anniversary dates on them. You couldn't know these things. And he said, I knew at that point. And then, so he knew, but he didn't believe it. Because I told him right after we were married, within a year, I told him, I think I see dead people and kind of see what he
I
did.
think I might.
Yeah, I think I might. And I tell him, somebody woke me up last night. Somebody died. And he'd go, okay, creepy. It's creepy. Um, what are you talking about? He kind of look at me like, I'm off my rocker. And then, my family was in this, my brother, they said was
Right.
schizophrenic, but he was actually, and they medicated him as a schizophrenic, which scared me to death. And I became a therapist for grief and addiction, and I knew they'd take my license away. So I was incognito all the time.
I bet. Well, especially because of
Yeah.
what happened to your mom. I actually have a question about your mom. One of the things you said was that she had been institutionalized and she was ignoring the things that she heard. Did you ever have a conversation with her, maybe as an adult later, and ask her what impact her thinking to herself, Susie's locked in a freezer, and then actually opening that door and finding you in the freezer? Like, that's not a random thing. That had to have affected her. Did you ever ask her about that?
Yes, she said that it was one of the most terrifying moments
I'm sure it
of
was
her life.
terrifying, but I mean,
She
from
heard
a
in her head.
confirmation standpoint, that you're like,
Yeah,
this is not made up. I am not imagining this. This is more real than real. She had
she
to have
didn't
had,
connect it.
she
She didn't
didn't.
connect it. I did, but she remained on Valium, a regular part of our journey. So
Wow.
she
That's
might
too
have connected
bad.
it and not told me. But when I did sit down with her and tell her, "Hey, mommy, I'm seeing things," and I know that when my brother Terry's talking to spirits, I'm hearing them. He's not schizophrenic. I'm hearing them, and I'm not schizophrenic, am I? That would be my response, and my mom would say, "Of course you're not. None of us are." But my father was a hardcore medical scientist. He was a PhD in
Mm,
biology,
that's a
scientist, and he
tough
was like,
cookie.
my brother was crazy in his mind. And so nobody wanted to touch that.
Oh, well, can we go back and ask some questions about your near-death experience?
Yes, yes.
I have so many questions. You are the only one, like, listen, you don't know me. I've done a lot, I've talked to a lot of people, but I've watched, listened to, and read thousands of these experiences now. And you've said some things in yours that I have never heard anybody else talk about. One was the room of companions, and one was the room of heart's desires. But you also, when you talked about the room of knowledge, you said there were a few other things I saw there, but then I left. And I was like, what are some of those other things you didn't share? What else did you see in that room of knowledge before you left there? Can you tell us more?
I It's the first time I've been asked this, and I saw what I thought my life was going to be. I
Do you
don't
remember what it
normally,
was?
yeah, there was going to be a lot of suicide, a lot of loss, a lot of trauma. And I they explained it to me in depth, but I didn't take it back with me really. Like I didn't want to remember. I remembered, but I didn't want to.
There's a
I
reason
didn't
we have
want
the
it to
veil,
be
right?
real. Yeah. I
Yeah.
didn't want it to be real. And I've had 5 death by suicides. Both my
You have had a
brothers, my
lot of
mother, and
trauma
my
in your life.
friends.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just one of those.
Well, I'm sorry
Um,
for all of
but
those losses, but at least you know beyond not just faith, but by experience where they are now.
I do. I do, but
Not
it
that it
doesn't
takes away
change
the
the grief.
loss, but
Right. Right. I try to explain that to people that because I've been there doesn't mean I don't grieve.
of course not, because we still
Yeah.
miss the person. Of
Yeah,
course.
absolutely. But I also saw other people almost having life reviews. See, no
What
one's
did
ever
that look
asked me this.
like?
Like a shower, but no water. It was like it would be like stepping into a shower of light or something, but there was no water, and they would be going through this review and this showery type cleansing. Everything that they reviewed and remembered would be cleansed from them into like a little encapsulated experience that they could take with them and keep
Almost
and
like a
learn
thumb
from.
drive. Like, here's your little thumb
Yeah.
drive of your life on
Yeah.
Earth.
Yeah, kind of, and it was just beautiful because whatever you do here, you're going to experience as though you're that person. So if I cause harm, and I try to explain this to people, if I cause harm, if someone harms me and I harm them back, I'm going to feel what my harm did. Not what their harm did, what my harm did. And
And
so
their
I'm a
experience of
very,
that harm, right?
and people say to me, Susan, how do you forgive them so easily? Well, it's easy for me because I don't, I'm not a harmer of people, and I am probably more innocent than most, that I forgive everything and that happens again and again and again because I don't want to retaliate in any form. I'm like, you need to understand and have grace. That's my big thing. Have grace for this person. They're
Look,
hurt.
this is the whole reason I do this. What you just said right now, I want everybody watching to rewind and listen to her say that again. You explaining life reviews are the entire reason I began interviewing people about near-death experiences, because the power of the life review changed everything about how I live my life. When you understand the ripple effect that you truly have, and then when you do things with intention, that even changes it more. And it is so powerful that I wanted to share it with as many people that it needed to be heard by. And you just shared something new, which is to let things go by grace. Will you say it again?
I carry a grace card in my pocket, a virtual, basically, grace card, an invisible grace card, and I give it to myself and I give it to others. I pull it out when in need
I love that you give it to yourself. Why do you give it to yourself?
because I too make mistakes and have bad thoughts and get mad at my kids and
You mean
do
you're
all
still
those things.
human?
Yeah, I'm still human. And I want to forgive myself. I want to love myself because the goal, the true bottom line of your soul path is self love. We innately come here being able to love others, but we are so hard on ourselves because we have a brain that tells us we're not good enough. And there's a dichotomy to that, right? We're almost battling. We're in a battle. Look, it's not good and evil, but it's definitely brain and love, brain and self-knowledge, self-fulfillment. And our brain, every mistake we make, we're so hard on ourselves. I am. Every flaw, every mistake, and I catch myself all the time, and I say, that's okay. You give yourself grace. You didn't mean to harm anybody, or you didn't mean to harm yourself. You really want to do good. and you don't always achieve it because you're a human having a human experience and you've got a brain battling that in war with you. And so I really believe that grace is the beauty of the spirit world. You receive full, complete grace. That's not an excuse to do bad things, because I'm going to tell you, you're going to feel them, but it's not a punishment from them. It's your soul needing to understand your experience. So you are going to feel it as if you are the person you harmed, or the entity, or the animal, or the whatever it is. There is nothing more powerful, and I'm going to say this to the rest of the world as long as I survive. The true hierarchy is love. The higher or the more you love, the higher you vibrate, the closer you are to source. We are not created to have, I think, because we have to live life, we have to have just, all these other things, all these other emotions. We're not created to be able to just naturally have it, pure love for ourselves. We have to work for it. And I
I
can
love
love
it.
you easier than me. I can give you beautiful comments easier than I can give them to myself. I'll say to me, look at my wrinkles and go, oh my gosh, your skin's beautiful. Right? That's
Just
what
like
I
our
do.
conversation we had in the beginning.
Yeah. And it's like I'm aware of this. And so I say to myself, they created me, and I'm putting myself down. And
And look behind you. As
yeah,
you said that, what came in? What came
my
in? The
baby.
biggest example we have of unconditional love came in
Yeah.
as an exclamation point on what you just said.
Yeah. And I'm going to tell you the two things that are the most beautiful things you'll ever hear and see on the other side.
Okay.
One is the animals and love, unconditional love. And the other is music. There's a reason why music heals and brings you to your knees with emotion. And it's because the angels created it. And when they open their, what I would call mouths, the words, and when you're in their presence, the words and the music come out at the same time. They created it for healing, to elicit emotions in you, to make you pause, to give you compassion of body, mind, spirit, compassion of people who are maybe on the street. You hear songs about people that are, lost love, or their families, suffered these unspeakable things, and then you see it and you feel this compassion. It is there for us to love, forgive, and feel, and it was created by them. So
I
between
love that you
this,
said that. I haven't really heard people talking about that.
oh, ask any near-death experiencer that has felt music on the
Yeah,
other
they
side,
talk about
and
the
they,
power of it,
oh,
but
it
not
is
that it
so
was
powerful.
created from the angels. I've never heard anybody say that.
So we're empathic people. I mean, souls always are and always will be, but I saw them working on it. Well, I've never shared this stuff except for
I
with my
love this.
family
This
and
is my
friends.
favorite.
I saw them working on a soul. And I asked them, what are you doing? Because souls always are and always will be. And I knew that there. I knew that. I wasn't confused about that. And they said, we're expanding their soul. And I said, why? And they said, because they're empathic and they're empaths. And I said, what does that mean? And basically, they explained to me that they're going to go through more and they're going to need some soul expansion. It was almost like it, like, how hot and cold shrinks things and then expands things. It almost felt like that. And looking back, and I understood what they meant. Like, we are going to need, empaths are going to need more room, because we learn from our experiences, or maybe a narcissist doesn't, or somebody may learn a little bit from their experiences. We learn from them, and we learn from others' experiences too. We feel everything. And the more empathic we are, the more we feel. So a child needs more soul expansion to hold all that. We're holding space for people at all times.
Wow.
And
So
most
powerful.
healers are.
So powerful. I love the music part. Susan, music is such a massive part of my life. It's kind of ironic, but today I listen to Spotify and it's the end of the year 2024 because these videos live in perpetuity. And I got my Spotify unwrapped and it's a recap of your year. And it said that I was in the top 10% or 18% of all Spotify listeners worldwide. Like that's how much time
Huge.
I spend with music. And I also feel like I don't get sick and my vibration is higher. And I know there's a connection to music and vibration and health. And I've heard you talk a little tiny bit about this. Will you kind of elaborate what you know about that?
About our health and
About the
music?
health and the vibration and all of that connected.
Well, I call it the sloth, the butterfly, and the hummingbird.
Okay.
Sloths are very low vibrating movement wise. They're very high vibrating creatures, but they're very low in movement. And so I call them the low vibrators because of that. And the butterfly is kind of like a medium or someone that is spiritually vibrating higher. And then you have the spirit world, which is the hummingbird. So if you think about how long it takes for a low vibrating creature to recognize the spirit hummingbird, because they go so slow, they've been to 60,000 places, that hummingbird, and the sloth hasn't seen it. They've missed it. So when we vibrate on a low vibrational energy, we're missing what's going on. We're missing love. We're missing light. We're missing the spirit world. I say this to my students. They come to my class and I ask them, what color were the flowers that you walked past when you were on your way up to my office? Every one of them jaw drops. I've only had one student that said they knew the colors. Their jaw drops and they look at me like, oh, is this a quiz? And I tell them, you're not present. Life's in session. Be present. Because how are you going to know when your loved ones are trying to speak to you? How are you going to know when there's a spirit near you? How are you going to know when someone feels love for you? How are you going to know when someone needs that moment of love if you're not present in this moment? We are so busy out in the ethers projecting, and projection is nothing but fear. It's fear-based, complete. The what ifs. What if this doesn't work? What if, what if, what if? That's all fear-based. That is not what spirit wants for us. They want us present in the moment. And when I stay where my feet are, I don't have anxiety. I'm not projecting. I'm not worried. I'm not in fear. I'm not going, am I going to have money next year, next month? Am I going to make, enough this week? I actually literally tell myself, Susan, where are your feet? Well, they're on wood floor. I have on my slippers and my sweatpants. And I detail where I am because I can't think of out there if I'm here. So I tell them, notice what's around you, be present. Your life is in session and you're missing it.
And
And
those are the
this,
things that they can do to help raise that vibration.
yes, because when you're present, you feel the love and the energy around you, including the spirit world. The way that I feel the spirit world is I say, suit up and show up. Your loved one needs you. And I leave my existence of thought outside of that room. I walk in, I sit down, and I'm outside of myself. I'm not thinking about everything that's going on at home because that's not my present moment. I'm not thinking about what's going to happen in an hour from now in another. I'm in the present so I can feel them.
Wow. So you mentioned something, you talked about life pulsating and how it was so difficult to describe with words, the pulsating that life is on the other side. You've had a few years since that experience. What's the closest that you've come to experiencing something like that here on Earth?
Child, baby,
Hmm.
everything's alive, isn't it? Even though you're exhausted, it's a euphoria. You go straight to euphoria after you have a child and they put that baby on you in your
Yeah,
arms.
you're right.
It's instant love wrapped in a blanket. And that's what death is like, by the way. Life and death are synonymous in every value. You are fighting, you don't want to come out of your mother's womb, you're going through the battle, you want to stay warm and cozy, the water breaks, it's like, where's my water? I want my warmth. You come out, your lights are shining on you, they pull you over to another area, they're poking and prodding, and you're screaming and crying, and then they wrap you in a blanket of love and they put you in your mother's arms, and all is well and right in your world. When you pass, you're fighting it, you're scared, you don't know what's going to happen, you're not really sure what you're going to see or not see. There's all this fear base, you're going through the battle, and then you get there and they wrap you in a blanket of love and all is right and well.
I love that. And then you've got your angels. So will you explain a little bit about what you know about you had different angels, you called them different things. Now that you have had time to process it and maybe connect with them again, what were those angels for you? Were they guardian angels? Were they archangels? Do they have a title for them?
Well, I think they were all guardian angels. I think they guard us all angels, and they are pure love. So they have never touched their feet on this earth. They may go through another human to bring earth angel love, but they don't personally drop down. They float. They don't touch this earth because they would be tainted.
Ooh, what did they look like?
Well, that's so interesting because people ask me, do they have wings? And I tell them it looks like it, but I'm not sure. And I'll tell you why, because they shine outside of them about 3 to 6 feet, just like your heart space does. So the energy of your
Mm,
heart shines outside of you 3 feet all around your body. That's a scientific fact. They shine like that too. And so if they had arms out, it would look like wings, wouldn't it? Because it's light coming off of them. Their whole bodies are in like a light beam. I think that's why I saw the cottage with the colors, because that's where they came out of. So it was part of them. It was like they appeared out of that. And it was
yeah.
all light and this beautiful iridescent coloring, and that's what comes off of them. And they look like kind of what you see almost like a human, but invisible. I know that sounds so opposite. Um, Picture a human not solid with meat, but a human with all light, made up of all light that
Wow.
shines out from them
Yeah.
in every
Okay.
direction. That would be what you would see.
And then you talked about the being that exuded more love than any love you have ever felt that you cannot describe. Do you have any idea? Was that a guide? Was it something else? Who was that being? I have an idea in my mind of who I think it was.
It was our source. It's our creator.
And you think because you were a 5-year-old, almost 5-year-old child that,
God.
yeah,
That's
appeared
what it
to
was
you
for me.
in a form that you could recognize that made sense? Do you think that
Yes,
that's the
because
real
God
form
made
of source?
sense because I was a little Catholic girl.
Ah,
Um, so it if I know this is unimaginable, but if you were to walk into a room and you could tangibly see pure love,
mm.
that's what you'd feel. That's what you'd see on that mountain.
That must have been absolutely incredible. And you can still connect with that through that memory.
Well, and I connected with it when I had my surgery again. And it was a pretty gnarly surgery, I have to be honest. It was pretty radical. They didn't
For
go
your
into my.
brain tumor? Yeah.
Yeah, it was sitting outside of my brain attached by little tentacles, and it was on my trigeminal nerve, so they had to be careful not to drop my whole face.
Oh
They
my
had to cut
gosh.
cut it out of my nerve
And we thought
upstairs.
wrinkles were the big thing we were worried about, right?
Yeah, yeah. Um, but yeah, and I remember feeling that, and I remember thinking, I might like to stay here. I'd like to just stay in this energy. It's so opposite of I mean, I've got my arms wrapped around myself right now. I just went right to wrapping my arms around myself because I feel guarded. That love is so pure that you want to guard it. Like I want to hold it in me and I want to feel it in me. I want to
It's so
offer
funny that you
it.
said that because when I've been on the other side and I've experienced that love, it is a knowing when I'm there that part of my purpose is to try to bring that love in and send it out. I don't know if it's going through my eyes, if it's going through some kind of a connection, but it's part of the purpose of why I've come in here is to try to bring that and send that into the world. But I do know what you are talking about when you say you want to guard it.
Yes, I when I do big groups, I do meditation and it's a love meditation. And I try to get them to sense that energy of pure love. It's pretty intense. And you'll see tears all over the room.
Hmm. Just because they reached a fraction of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can
So,
imagine.
oh, yes. Amazing. So I have two more questions I want to ask you, and then I want you to tell everybody where people can find you and about your books and the courses and things that you're teaching. So you talked a lot about these pyramids, pyramid shapes, the pyramids that were the part of the paving paths, which by the way, I've never heard anybody describe anything like that, and how we are destined to have this incarnation and we choose all these things, but then we have help with the paving of the path. Why pyramids? Do you know what their significance is? And do they tie into the pyramids here? And is that why those are kind of the mystery schools, maybe on Earth also?
I don't know. I think that, yes, I think that pyramids were created and connected to the spirit world, just
Because you
like we
kind of
are.
drew on your book a pyramid. If you look at it, if you
I
turned it
did.
a certain direction, it's a pyramid
It
shape.
is.
Yeah.
It is. And Hay House did that, knowing my story.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah, because it's a profound effect. I mean, when you think about a pyramid, it has a root, basically. It's balanced. It's balanced. It has a perfect balance. That's why it doesn't topple over, because it has, a good base to it. And, I really believe in our root chakras, and I believe in sending that down into the earth and making usable energy come back through it. And I just feel like it has to do with time,
Interesting.
time.
Because
There
people
is
have
no
talked
time
about the
there.
pyramids being portals.
Yeah, I agree. It's like a time capsule or something. I don't know how else to put. Sounds so silly to say it that way, but I don't know how else to say it. Um, there is no time there, but it has been forever and always, and so have the pyramids. I mean, if you think about it, it just seems that that was the beginning and the middle and the end. And when I look at a pyramid, I see the beginning, the top, the middle, and the bottom is the end. And so I see the power of that. They also carry a lot of energetic qualities,
Like what?
light.
Light. Hmm. Well, I'm about to find out because I'll be going there in about a month, and I'm super excited to do that.
You will be in complete awe. You'll be standing before what's in the spirit world.
Yeah.
And it carries a light in it, in feeling also, not in vibration. It has a vibrational pull. I don't know why I'm saying that, because I just felt it there. I've never seen a pyramid here, but I felt a vibrational pull of
Wow.
great significance.
Maybe that's what I'm feeling to go there as well.
Maybe it is.
So the last question is you mentioned the number three. You said you didn't know why three was so important, but three was everywhere. What do you think it means now? What is the significance of three? And what would you tell the people who are seeing threes, repetitive threes, or experiencing things and patterns of threes in their lives?
I really believe that the ascended masters created that number for whatever reason, to be a witness to us. And, I know this is biblical, but they say Christ died at 33. Threes are powerful. If you look at the points on a pyramid, it's three. Threes, everywhere you look, you'll see a shape that has that in it somewhere. You just do. And I believe that it carries a significance of connection from us to the spirit world.
Hmm. Well,
I
speaking of
believe,
a connection from us to the spirit world, this is something that you have honed and you have perfected over a long period of time. And I would imagine there are a lot of people watching who want to connect with you, want to read your books, want to learn from you. So tell me a little bit about what you do as a medium, because it sounds like those abilities are pretty strong from what you communicated with your husband, and that was a while ago.
yeah, they are strong. They're mind-blowingly strong sometimes, and sometimes they're just normal. Um, I think when I read someone, I'll tell them, something about their loved one, and they'll go, "Oh my gosh, how could you know that?" And I'm thinking, "Oh my gosh, how did I know that?" That's how mind blowing it is. I still do it after all these years. It'll never be normal to me and just average. I have to say that it's the hardest thing I've ever done because I see the hardest and most painful experiences in people, but I've also had the hardest, most painful experiences. Not
Yes.
some of it is worse, but I think that for me, doing my work is all about grief healing. It's not about, oh, let me connect you to your loved one and let's have fun here. I'm actually walking them through a healing mechanism for grief. When you recognize that there's no way for me to know the things I know and your loved one's next to you, I- the healing begins. It doesn't take the pain of loss away, no more than it does for me. But imagine knowing that, like you walk in not believing, you think they're gone forever and ever and you'll never hear from them again, and boom, you're in a room with someone and you're hearing from them. And it's awe-inspiring, and they leave with tears of joy. And every review I've ever gotten, well, there's been a couple that they didn't like me, but every most reviews I've gotten, almost all of them, they've said it was life-changing for them, and they
Yeah.
felt like they had been in grief therapy for a year in that 45-minute moment.
Because you restored hope. They no longer had to have the faith that somebody was still alive or alive in some way. They actually have evidential information that they still exist. And I think that that restores hope for a lot of people. I can understand how and why that is life changing.
Yeah, me too. It changes my life. I think that people think being a medium is like a hocus pocus thing. And honestly, it's the hardest thing in the world because we're holding space for the worst of the worst losses. And we're going home every night hearing about everyone's pain and agony and grief, extensive, deep loss. And we're trying to function in our own worlds, having all of that information filtering in. And a good medium is empathic. Not all mediums are empathic, by the way, but a good medium is. Um, and so we're pulling all that in. Somebody called me a grief vampire, and I said, "You're right. I suck in all the grief."
Yeah,
And they were shocked because they were insulting me, that I was a fake, basically, or whatever. Somebody, I don't even remember, somebody I probably ran into that I shared what I do. But I remember saying, "You're right. I'm sucking in all that grief, and I'm trying to protect myself from it, because transference is impossible not to have when you're hearing about someone losing their child
of
and they're in front
course.
of you, just destroyed. And then you see them shift and they walk away without that destructive look. They still are in pain,
Of
they're still in
course.
agony, but they're not destroyed because they know they're there. And then you see them start working in communication with them, in tandem with them, and they'll write me and say, "My son came to me last night and I recognized him because you told me how to do that, Susan." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, this is amazing. It's amazing."
That is such a gift that you share. So how do people work with you and connect with you?
SusanGrau.com. It's GRAU. They can read all about my story. They can get my book, which is Infinite Life, Infinite Lessons. And the byline is Wisdom from the Spirit World on Living, Dying, and the In Between, which is really cool. I just love that. And they can go to Susan Grau Official and see the things that I have upcoming on any social media platform. And I'm doing a book signing in Los Angeles at the Americana in January. If they watch my social media, they'll find out the dates. I think it's the 17th, if
And
I
that's
remember.
January of
Oh, it's the
2025.
11th.
Just in case you're watching this 5 years from now, she's probably already
Yes.
done it.
Yes, I probably have already done it. Maybe I'll have my other books out.
I love it. Susan, I don't think I've ever said this to anybody on my show, but I feel like my soul lights up around you.
Oh, thank you so much. That is just,
It makes me want to cry saying it too.
it
And I
makes me want to
don't know
cry
why it
hearing
does, it
it.
just does.
Thank you. You
Yeah,
couldn't say
thank you.
anything more loving.
Well, thank you so much for what you are doing to help wake up the collective consciousness. It is so needed right now, and I appreciate you coming on here and being vulnerable and sharing your story.
Thank you for having me. It's been wonderful being in your presence also.
Oh,
You
thank
have
you.
a
And
light that shines, and you said something I just want to say to you really briefly. You said
yeah,
something about I don't know where that love comes from or where it shines out of me. And you mentioned your eyes, or maybe it's something else, and it is your eyes. I can see into your soul through your eyes.
wow. Well,
Yeah,
thank you. That's a gift from me. I really appreciate that.
it is true. It is very true. It shines. I mean, it's just unbelievable. Your
Thank you.
goodness.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you so much, everybody, for watching. Next up, check out this playlist of other NDE interviews. Please like and subscribe. It really helps this channel to grow so I can bring you more content. Thank you for watching. I'm so glad you're here.